Hello, everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. Upcoming birth of a child is a time filled with excitement, anticipation, and sheer giddiness, if I recall correctly. But we can't wait for that little one to get here. We think we've got everything covered, but nothing really prepares you for the expansion of your heart to love your new baby boy or girl, nor the urge to make sure everything is perfect at every moment. And it can become quite overwhelming, especially if it's your first time, or perhaps you might not have the support system that you need. And so the time after a baby is born has been called the fourth trimester. Just as the pregnancy is carefully managed over the 3 trimesters, we've got to think ahead to what postpartum is going to look like. And my guest today helps parents do that. She is Diane Speier, a certified childbirth educator and the author of the book, Life After Birth, a parent's holistic guide for thriving in the 4th trimester. Welcome, Diane.
Oh, thank you for bringing me on. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I know that a lot of people want to know about that 4th trimester. A lot of times we're just not prepared for that time, getting adjusted after our little ones get here. So I am so happy that you're here to talk about all of that. So right. Start off just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into this work.
Okay, well, I got into it so long ago now. It's like 45 years ago now, if I think correctly, when I started getting involved and became a certified childbirth educator. And within a short period of time, within a year, I was running postpartum support groups, just mothers coming together and talking and sharing with their babies, and creating a mini sort of sense of community for women who being able to share and learn from others who were at the same stage of life as they were. Mm-hmm. And then a few years after that, I sort of took the bits and pieces of what came across as the things that they were most interested in was getting back into shape, and then also having a way of interacting with their babies that was meaningful and purposeful. And so I created a mother and baby exercise class, mm-hmm. and that ran for 20 years. And I live in the UK now. But it started in New York, and then I continued it here for the first few years after I got to the UK. And this really did start to create a sense of community, because I would bump into mothers in schools and things like that, and they'd say, I'm still friends with the people that I met in your class, and this is 10 years later. Mm-hmm. And for that, I'm really happy. But I also taught childbirth classes for 20 years. And sort of pulled all this sort of experience of teaching as well as learning during that process from my clients over the years. And then I got my PhD in women's studies when I came to the UK, looking back at my years as a birth professional. And I should also say, as an aside, I'm also a psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist and a celebrant. And they kind of overlap at sometimes, and sometimes they don't. So as a mental health practitioner, I'm dealing with perinatal mental illness sometimes. But as a celebrant, it's like providing ceremonies for mothers, a very different kind of, not a sort of baby shower, mm-hmm. but a ceremony that really sends the woman on her journey to give birth, and in as powerful and as strong a way as possible, with her community of people around her as well. So sometimes they overlap, and sometimes they're separate. Mm-hmm. But it was when my first grandson was born, and my daughter, who'd grown up with me, coming to my classes and sort of expecting a lot, said to me, well, where are all the books on the postpartum period? And I said, well, there really are only a handful of books that have ever been written that I'm aware of. She said, well, it's time for you to write that book. So I began that process. And then about, I don't know, 6 months to a year after I started that, she said, you know, that book you're writing, I'd like to create an app for it. And that's where Digital Doula was born. Now, the very original version of Digital Doula came out in 2013 and essentially was like the first draft of my book. And at that point, I really wasn't familiar with what the various parts of an app were about. But we put it out there in the market and it had lots of good information. And then over the years, I realized as I was actually writing the book and editing the book and in the publication process, I realized, no, the app has to change. And then what happened was Digital Doula 2.0, which was released in 2020, just as we were all going into lockdown, was very much connected to the book. So each of the sections in the book has a section in the app with lots of information, and lots of the links that are in the book, only in black and white, became live links in the app. So people had resources that were available to them. We included a part called Hot Topics, which was lots of articles that they could read about various subjects that are very pertinent to the kinds of needs that parents have when they've just had a baby. So I have really focused on the postpartum period for over 40 years. And really, you know, it's sort of something that I can't seem to stop.
Don't stop, because I think you're doing really important and just life-saving work, you know.
Yeah, I do think so. I think I've said it before. I think it's in my DNA at this point. You know, it's like I really somehow feel it's so important to get this information out, because there are so many books. I mean, I remember when I started having babies in the 1970s, there was a handful of books, really. And that area has expanded exponentially over the last 40 some odd years. And so you'll have a big section on pregnancy, and you have a big section on childbirth, and lots of aisles of parenting books. But no one was really focusing on what happens right after the baby is born, because this is such an incredible time, a mixture of exhilaration and exhaustion, of, you know, of celebration and oh my God, you know, kind of things. And all of that is natural and nothing is wrong with it, but we don't have a blueprint for what do you do after the baby is born? What happens when the baby comes home? How will you relate to your partner after the baby is born? What kind of role changes are going to take place? There are so many different dimensions in which they're all angling for attention that I feel like if I can provide information that's useful and purposeful and helps them to navigate this period, maybe sometimes turbulent waters, then I've helped a lot of people. So that's my goal, really. My mission was to provide that missing link.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you mentioned in there that, you know, the postpartum experience is not just the mom or mother and child, it's their spouse or partner. And I'm just curious, what do you talk about in the book, or, you know, an example, I'm sure it runs throughout the book, but of what concerns the spouse and the partner and how they can be supportive?
Well, every section of the book addresses the partner at some point. Okay, so there'll be a chapter, because each section has 6 or 7, maybe 7 chapters. There'll always be a chapter that sort of focuses on the father's experience or the partner's experience. So, for instance, in the first section of the book called the Fourth Trimester, the part that addresses the father talks about what's his experience. What's it like for him to kind of come home with the baby? How's his life changing? He's going through some transitions as well. What happened, you know, as a result of maybe him being present at the birth? And how can he be supportive? And what kinds of things can he do? So it lays it out there very clearly for them. Then when it comes to the section on the dynamics of hormones and the stress response, these are ways of helping both of them manage their stress. Ways in which a partner can be very supportive, and grandparents for breastfeeding, what kinds of things are really supported for that. And then the bonding and attachment, each of them is having a bonding experience with their baby, maybe slightly different, depending on what's going on. And really encouraging that partner to be engaged in the process, because the fact of the matter is the baby has different relationships with each parent. If both parents are there, not every time, that's not always the case, but if both parents are there, the mother provides one type of care, the father provides a different type of care, and together they really become a whole. Yes. And so I want to encourage the father to sort of really be present for what's going on. And oftentimes what happens, the relationship is a big part of the book, and it's a big part of the app. And how do we protect that relationship? Because I think most people are unaware of how that relationship will change with the birth of a child. And it changes in various ways. So one of the things I bring attention to, and I bring it in the book, in the app, and now I'm in the creation of an online course, taking some of the principles of the book and putting it into an 8-module course. So the very first module that's been finished is called How to Baby-Proof Your Relationship. And in it, we include this, it's like a document, I'll call it, but it's a very pretty thing. We made it like a bonus. And what it does is it discusses the division of labor in advance. So who is doing this task? All of the tasks that are part of a household. Who was doing it before the baby was born? Who's going to do it after the baby is born? Who's going to be taking care of some of the infant care needs? Because what happens is, for a lot of women especially, who have been in a relatively egalitarian relationship with their partners, suddenly a baby is born, partner is still going out to work, mother's home, and she picks up a lot of that domestic work and finds herself maybe reverting back into a more gendered stereotypes of what a homemaker is supposed to be. And it's a slide. It feels like it's a slide backwards. And so if you spend the time talking about this ahead of time, then the likelihood of reducing the level of conflict is good. If you don't, then we create resentments. I'm doing all of this work and you're not helping the way I'd like you to. So it allows them to crystallize some ideas ahead. It's like birth planning. This is sort of postpartum planning. And it's bringing into their awareness the fact that if you pay attention to it now, then the two of you can be more likely working as a team after the baby is born to get these things done.
Yes, speaking of birth planning, that is really what I was thinking about. And just even going back, I have twin sons who are now young adults. And just thinking back to my pregnancy and what I was doing, what was I reading up on and all of that, certainly not this. And there is time, 9 to 10 months is a long time, or really several months. It's a long time where you can take a look at these things, take a look at these issues, just like you're focused on making sure you eat right and get enough rest because you're thinking about the babies that you're carrying. And you're thinking about what you need, you're looking, creating your registry and all of that. You're thinking about those things. But this postpartum period is so important, and you do have time to really think through these things and talk about them. Doesn't mean you'll be prepared for everything, but you certainly will have a head start.
You have a little advantage there. One of the things that I realized after all the years that I was teaching births was that most mothers, and probably partners as well, were just wanting to get through the birth, just let me get through the birth. I can't think about that now. That it's like, and that's where we get stuck, is that it doesn't finish with the birth. It just starts with the birth. And
Mhm.
so, that's why I think it's really useful. I think it's really helpful to be able to imagine, if not crystallize, what
Sure.
your needs are and how do we take care of everybody's needs, the
Mhm.
baby's needs, the mother's needs, the partner's needs, everybody. Because when you feel as if your needs are getting met, you feel okay. But it's when you don't feel that those needs are getting met
Mhm.
that resentment or conflict starts to come up. And there is a sobering statistic that says 92% of couples will experience increased conflict in the first year after a baby's born. And
Mhm.
that's almost everybody.
Mhm. Mhm.
So let's do what we can. Part of my mission is to reduce that as much as possible.
Mhm.
Um, because what ends up happening is that when things get stressful, and they will, and they are, but that's just some sort of part of the deal, then we start blaming each other. Oh, you didn't
Mhm.
do that right. I don't. And so I think it's good not to go down that blame game, because it just doesn't take us anywhere that's really productive.
Right.
But preparing is a good way of minimizing that.
Yes, and I want to ask you a quick question, sort of related. I know that you are a doula, and I did not have experience with a doula with, for my childbirth experience and all that. And I'm wondering, are they like concerned with the fourth trimester too, or do they primarily just focus on, um, seeing the mom through, the pregnancy and then childbirth, and then that's it? I was wondering if you're unique in that.
We'll be right back after this. You love your kids. You do your very best for them. But sometimes it feels like it's just not enough. And you're so sure you're the only one who feels this way. The truth is, you're not alone. It is also true that there are some things you're doing quite right. And there's a community who would love to exchange ideas with you. I'm Carol Maletta, creator of the Parenting 411, a portal for parents where I share information parents need through webinars and masterclasses. And not only that, the parents there support each other on this amazing journey in the Parenting 411 community group on Facebook. I can't wait to meet you in the community. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
You know what? Some people are just birth doulas.
Okay.
Some people will focus on being a postpartum doula. Some people, like me, cross over. I started attending births in 1978, and I probably crossed over into postpartum doula care in the 80s.
Mhm.
And it's, I won't say if everybody's like me, because I'm kind of, well, I like to think of myself as unique in some ways, that my journey has very, very particular to this way of integrating my background as a psychologist with, the
Mhm.
whole birth process. But the way in which a doula will interact with parents during the postpartum period
Mhm.
is to do a lot of the things around the house that the mother is unable to do because she's got this baby.
Mhm.
And so sometimes, I go in and I'll notice what's going on. So maybe the mother needs to take a shower,
Mhm.
or maybe the mother just needs to take a rest and have somebody hold the baby. Or sometimes I'll be cooking a meal.
Mhm.
So there are a variety of tasks that, if you take those tasks off the mother's shoulders, then
Mhm.
she can spend that time getting to know her baby. And she can be engaged with that whole process of of learning what the baby is all about, what the cues are that she needs to know, and all of the little aspects, the tiny, tiny little aspects about becoming familiar with your newborn. So somebody takes some of the scut work off their, responsibilities. And I've done that. So it really varies. Sometimes if somebody's had a cesarean section, I'm there to do a lot more because she's less able to get around because she has had major abdominal surgery. So it varies. But when it comes to the being with a woman and during labor, I think that it's about supporting the mother. When a woman goes in the American system, which is obstetric driven, so that most women have doctors and are seen by nurses there, those people have responsibilities for more than one patient. So they're going to come and go. A woman who's been hired as a doula is going to be there with a mother continuously, unless she has to use the toilet or something. Mainly she's there for the mother. And she's providing support. She's providing advice. She's an advocate in case something comes up. So I was once a while ago, this is going back, before I came to the UK in 1998, I was there for a woman who had, her doctor wasn't there when she went into labor. It was one of those things, they went on holiday just as they were, she went into labor. So she was being attended to by someone she didn't know, who didn't really know her. And they would come in and they would keep looking at the machine, which was the monitor. And they would pay no attention to her. And I was like, this is not good. When they start paying more attention to the machine than the mother in labor, that's a problem, and so they didn't like the fact that I said that. But it was a way of telling the mother that don't get hung up on that. Just focus on what you need to do. And that's to get this baby born. And we're going to help you to do that. And we're going to provide all the support that you need between me and her husband. And we did that. And I also had a relationship with the woman who was the chairman of that department. And I did raise it as an issue of what's going on, because I did have that. I had those kind of relationships with various obstetricians in those days. So so they work in different ways, in different capacities. And there will be some times when I've been a doula for birth, and then I continue to stay with the mother after she's, when she's gotten home.
Oh, okay. So, then I guess I have had a similar experience. She called herself a baby nurse. And so I had the twins. And so we had already planned to have her for 1 week, I think it was. And oh my goodness, she did not only, help me with taking care of the babies, but she did a lot of those other things that you said that really kind of helped me. And I just remember the end of that first week when she was supposed to go home, and I was just feeling so sad and so lost. And keep in mind, my mother was also, lived in the area and was a tremendous help. Don't get me wrong. But so anyway, it's like, could you stay longer? So she ended up staying 3 weeks. And, so that was good. So I guess, she just didn't call herself a doula. And at that time, I wasn't familiar with doulas. So I just didn't use that term, but I guess it was very, very similar. And boy, she was absolutely a godsend. I hate that we actually lost touch, because I think she'd probably love to see how the boys turned out and all of that. But so what are the most common challenges mothers have postpartum?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
The most common challenges mothers have postpartum.
Probably breastfeeding. Because we get lots of different information, and sometimes they're conflicting information or contradictory bits of information. And you may get this information from a nurse and this information from a pediatrician, and you might get this, and they don't necessarily jive. It's one of those things that we don't have, we don't have a manual for it, so we don't go in, oh, look at it. So we need a lot of support for that.
Mhm.
Sometimes that support might be a lactation consultant, but sometimes that support might just be a partner who provides like a level of protection around her
Mhm.
against people that will say things like, does she have enough milk? Or maybe the baby needs bottle now, and they're not said with any malice or intent. They're just questions from that generation,
Mhm.
sort of like wondering about that. But they're undermining
Mhm.
when a woman is trying to breastfeed. I didn't have trouble breastfeeding myself, but more and more it seems it's become such a complicated thing.
Mhm.
And I wish, so that's my breastfeeding section, which has been, again, many chapters in it, really talks about the practical aspects of that,
Mhm.
as well as some of the more cultural and social kinds of impediments to that. People who feel uncomfortable breastfeeding in public, or people that make an issue of somebody else breastfeeding in public. I mean, so that kind of thing is a little worrying. But then there are also, ways in which we can facilitate. So I really want to make it easier, so
Right.
that it doesn't feel quite as challenging as it is. I think relationship stress is another challenge that comes up that people are completely unaware of. That's why the very first module in the online course is about how to baby-proof your relationship.
Mhm.
Because it's, I didn't have that. I had my ex-husband and I, we really worked very well as a team in terms of parenting all of our children. I have 4 children,
Mhm.
and 3 grandchildren at this point. And we really were, we didn't experience that kind of relationship stress then anyway. Came later, but people just don't know that that's going to happen. And so when you were 2 people, it's a very different dynamic than when you're a triangle.
Mhm.
And so how do you protect that relationship, and how do you make sure the division of labor chart being one of them? I think the level of role changes that are coming on. So if a woman has been working in the labor force for a certain number of years and suddenly is at home taking care of the baby, not earning any income, she may have, if she's very lucky, some kind of maternity leave, maybe not.
Mhm.
Or she might, but it may not be paid. I mean, whatever the case is. So she's changed now from a person into a parent. She
Mhm.
both of them have, it's not just the mother, but focusing on her, she's now dependent, whereas before she was independent. She's got to deal with that.
Mhm.
Her activities in the course of a day, 24/7 watching after a baby. And what does that mean? And what does that represent? So there are so many different kinds of role changes. Sometimes we talk about them as transitions, many transitions, more than just the one transition into parenthood.
Mhm.
So with that, we really want to understand. I want to help them understand those kinds of changes, and so they can navigate them a little bit more with more grace, if possible.
Mhm.
And then just the new normal.
Mhm.
That's one of the sections. That's one of the modules actually in the online course. And by the way, the course is called 8 Keys to Thriving in the Fourth Trimester, because I often would hear from those, I just want to get back to normal. And
Right.
like you could.
That's coming.
Normal is completely changed. It's not the same. It's a completely different experience.
Mhm.
And so rather than look backwards at what was, I really, I want them to direct their attention forwards, with the new, and embracing that, really taking that on. And because it's an opportunity. It's sort of like potential, if we can use it that way.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, what are some signs that a mother might be in crisis and really need some medical attention during postpartum?
Okay, that could be broken down into two different categories. So medical attention for something physical, and then maybe medical attention for something psychiatric or psychological. So if on the physical side of things, if the mother spikes a fever, and that's especially if she's had a cesarean section. Did you have a cesarean section with your twins?
I did, and I spiked a fever and I had to go back to the hospital.
So yeah, because when you have just had surgery and you end up with a fever, it's often an indication that there's an infection.
Mhm.
So you want to have that taken care of. So you're such a perfect example of that,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But if there's excessive bleeding,
Mhm.
that will need attention. If there's vaginal itching or an odor, that could be some other kind of an infection. If she were to develop a breast abscess. So these are sort of physical reasons why you might want, you need to find yourself probably into an A&E or emergency room. A&E. That's an English term, I think, accident and emergency.
Mm.
Yeah, so you want to go to the emergency department for that. Yeah, there are probably variations of those as well. But I think those would really be the primary ones that you really want to make sure you get attention rapidly.
Sure.
Then from the psychiatric side, we have mood and anxiety disorders that come up. And sometimes we call them perinatal mood and anxiety disorders because they sometimes even start during pregnancy.
Mhm.
And so if that's happening, some of the signs of that would be a disinterest in the baby
Mm.
or a low mood,
Mhm.
or the mother expressing the fact that she's inadequate to the point of paralysis. She just can't move, she can't do anything. The inability to sleep might be an anxiety issue or a disconnection from reality. Sometimes in extreme cases, it could be hallucinations. So if these are happening, then you want to find a mental health practitioner and a psychiatrist
Mhm.
because that will require some medication to stabilize her.
Okay.
So those might be some of the more psychiatric elements of that. That I would be. So, I mean, we do want to stay. I think that's one of the advantages, if I may say. Even though the use of midwives during birth and after birth is a much smaller number in the United States, I think it's roughly around 10%. What happens during that experience is that there's more of an opportunity to ask questions and to get really useful information. And then the midwife will continue to see the mother for, a couple of visits during the first week, up to 10 days. And then, so that she'll be more aware of what's happening in terms of the mother's mood or the mother's health. Whereas if you have to wait 6 weeks to see the obstetrician for that 6-week exam, a lot of things can be missed. Now, when I wrote the book, in the actual introduction of the book, I talk about the fact that the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology came out with a practice guide, I forget they have a word for that, in 2018, indicating that they understood that there's a need for mothers to be seen earlier than that 6-week checkup. And that by doing that, say 3 weeks, if there was something going on and she was screened and it showed that there was obvious need for her to be under the care of some kind of perinatal mental health pathway, then she could be, I think it's a multidisciplinary kind of group of practitioners that would be responsible for her care. And she could be seen sooner before it really spirals downward too much. I mean, but as far as I know, I don't think that's actually been implemented yet. And so it's a loss, I think, because that's what needs to happen, is that there needs to be some way of screening prior to that, of understanding what's going on for her. Maybe, she's really overwhelmed. Maybe she's suffering from depression or anxiety. Any of those things can be cropping up in those first 6 weeks. And if they get around to implementing that, I think it would be wonderful, because I think that we'll be catching things before they become real, real problems. So
it makes a lot of sense, for sure.
We'll be right back after this. As the saying goes, mother's work is never done, except when it really is. I'm talking about my new book, Mother's Work, Pearls of Wisdom and Gems from My Journey. I share my transformation from an outmanned, overwhelmed mom of twin boys to a parenting strategist and consultant, and being honored as DC Mother of the Year by American Mothers Incorporated. In Mother's Work, I tell you about the 7 guideposts that kept me anchored as I weathered the peaks and valleys of motherhood. Grab your copy at carolmaletta.com/motherswork. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Absolutely.
So for the time being, midwives do that. They actually do that. They're aware. And there is a screening test called the EPDS. It stands for the Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale. It's used worldwide. And it asks a series of 10 questions. So it's a sort of self-report. And those questions give an indication as to what the mother's state of mind is. And it's a useful tool to use in those first several weeks. So I'm hoping that we're going in that direction.
I hope so too. Now, shifting now to where we're going to just inspire and give a little advice to our expectant mothers. What are 3 things, for example, that an expectant mother could do right now to pave the way for an easier transition from pregnancy through to postpartum?
Well, the first thing would be that division of labor chart and starting that discussion, because that's going to help. That's going to foster the connection between the partners as they go into this new journey and a whole new adventure. And if we can think of it as an adventure, then there's an upbeat aspect to it. I think it's really important to set up a support system in advance. And a support comes in so many different sizes. That's another module in the online course, to focus on what will be your needs. Who do you want to have around you? And really paying attention to that ahead of time, because, like, for instance, my mother was of that generation where they put them to sleep before they were. I was born in 23 minutes and they still put ether on. Because she got out of the car, they told her to cross her legs, put her on a gurney, and took her into the delivery room. And so she was like, "Oh, I would really like to come and be there when you give birth," because I had 2 home births, but the first one ended up in the hospital as a transfer. So she would hear me in the bedroom going, howling pretty much, and was very nervous about that. And the other people that were there were trying to coax her to come on, Muriel, let's go into the kitchen, get her away from listening. In the end, I had to leave, and so did she. So when my 4th birth was coming up, I thought, maybe that's not a good idea, because maybe that's an inhibiting aspect to what I was going through. So I didn't invite her that time. She wasn't the right support for me. For that particular time. So you want to be sure that the people who are going to support you are going to be on your wavelength, or maybe on the same page. And that and maybe they have different ideas about feeding babies, and maybe they have different ideas about that may clash. It's finding peers that can support you, finding a lot of experienced people who have wisdom to share. And then support also comes. There's financial support, there's social support, so it may be that they have a group on Facebook, that does that, provides that kind of support.
Mhm.
There is a section in the app called It Takes a Village.
Mhm.
And that is where we're now working in the direction of making that a community where people can become, part of that community, and they can connect with each other, and they can become, a real resource for each other in that sense. So support, I think, is really important, so that you understand there's practical support, have people come, bring food. Nobody should be able to come to the house unless they brought food. Because everybody wants to come and see the baby. And that's one of the reasons why I knew this book had to be written, because for 9 months she was pampered and blessed and, just really celebrated for what she was doing, is creating this baby. And then the baby is born, and everybody's eyes sort of shift over to the baby, and she sort of fades into the background and becomes almost invisible. And I just think that's so wrong. That, she hasn't disappeared. She's a whole lot of responsibility now. So we really need to mother the mother, and we need to take care of her, and we need to feed her, and we need to keep her hydrated, and we need, so having some of those things in place. When I was having my fourth, I had been introduced to this by other birth professionals, this idea of contract for hours. Because sometimes people say, well, is anything I can do? And you sort of have to come off the top of your head. So like, I'm not sure, I'll let you know. Whereas if you have this, you can indicate the very specific ways in which they can assist. So somebody can sign up for food. Somebody can take older kids to after school activities. Somebody can take, provide conversation. I mean, so there are different ways in which you can get your needs satisfied by people. And people want to help, they really do. But this makes it very clear in black and white exactly how they can do it. They don't have to guess, you don't have to think, it's done.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that, I think finding a doula is a good way, of in advance, how they can prepare in advance for a smoother transition, because that's the person that's going to help them kind of do that. It's going to really allow them that time to be enjoying the baby. And it's like that baby moon experience where you're in a little cocoon with your baby and your partner, and it's a learning curve. It's very, very steep, but it's wonderful.
Yes, that sounds great. How can family members kind of be thinking about what they could do ahead of
Well, I think they can read my book. And I'm only saying that because there's so much information in there that might be new to them. So if they are parents or in-laws, and they've come from a different generation and they did things differently then, the book gives them lots more information that's useful to have, so they can be there intelligently with their child who's going through all of this. It's finding out what resources there are for their child who just became a parent. There are various ways that they can, and again, a parent can do some of the things that a doula can do. Sometimes a doula is not affordable.
Right.
And so that was one of the reasons why Digital Doula came out, because that's also chock full of information that's available at any time of day and night, and lots of mothers are into scrolling their phone. So, but parents can do that, where, they can prepare food, they can come and cook, they can clean, they can assist in the ways that provides an environment that's that mother doesn't really have to think about anything else other than her baby.
That, I will forever be grateful to my mother for that. I mean, she really did whatever needed to be done. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't want you to come over and work like that. She said, but it needs to be done. Washing clothes or, washing bottles when we got to that phase or anything. She just was willing to do anything to help me and bathing the children if that's what, needed to be done. And that's something that I was really grateful for. I mean, because I've had other, people come over and, oh, I don't do laundry. And I almost felt like saying, but that's what I need today. So you could probably, the kids are asleep, you could probably go home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
I just, because it's not what you want to do. I mean, help in the way that's needed.
That's right. And mothers will know that, mothers want to be mothered. And, it's a primal kind of response after a baby is born. And it's wonderful if they can provide that without conflict, because that's not always.
Yes. I mean, and I certainly, like I said, that's not why I wanted them to come over, but that just happened to be what I was, the baby's laundry, like not mine. I mean, but that's what we got for today. So
Right. Right. And then also in terms of it, I remember I went through a period, I think when I was preparing for my daughter, was my third child. I cooked in advance and I put things in the freezer. Yes. And I had that ready, so that's something that, during the end, when a mother starts to nest in anticipation of the baby being born and coming home, that's an opportunity to sort of cook things that can be frozen and then defrosted for a meal. So, but that can also be done by a loving parent or a doula. Sure. So, I mean, those are the things. It's like making sure that the mother's needs are really being attended to, she's being attended to. And that includes making sure she's drinking, being hydrated. Mm-hmm. All of those things are really essential, I think, anyway.
Yes. So what's next up for you with the book and the app and your work?
Well, the next step, there are two next steps for me, actually. They're happening at the moment. One is that I am completing my certification as an energy medicine practitioner. And that means that in the book, what I guess my USP of this book is that it introduces energy medicine as practical tools for self-care, ways in which you can use these just simple protocols to reduce your stress, to increase your energy, to increase your milk flow, to help the bonding and attachment process, to stay connected in a relationship. Each section of the book has an energy medicine piece that goes with it. And that is expanded in the app in Digital Doula 2.0. And it's also part of this 8 Keys for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester, which is going to be an online course. So that's the other second piece, is that I am creating that now. We're probably in next month, we're going to launch a beta test for this. So if anyone in your audience would like to take part in that, we would love that, because we're looking for feedback, what works, what doesn't work, and all of that. And we'll be releasing, another module as we go along. And hopefully those people that are going to get it at a greatly reduced price, because they're contributing to the actual creation of that, will really make it, even better than I think it should be. So that's the next step is this online course. It's going to be a teachable course, and people can find, and then I think I can reach an even larger audience of people. They may be pregnant, which is ideal, but they may have just had the baby, so they can only dip in and out of it, when they have a moment. And who has a moment, but maybe there's something that they could be listening to in those early days after they've given birth. So I'm kind of excited about that. It feels like it's the next step after the book and the app, and just bringing it out there into the world, because it is a missing link. It's a gap to fill. And I feel like that's my role.
I think it's going to be a tremendous help. Can you give a link or tell listeners how they could contact you to find out about being part of the beta group?
Okay, well, my email address is diane@dianespeier.com. Now, let me spell that, because the surname gets misspelled a lot. So it's DianeSpeier.com. And that's the email they can write to me at. But then they can also go to the website, and that's dianespeier.com, or www.dianespeier.com. They can find me on Facebook, Diane S. Speier, and on Instagram, it's Dr. Diane Speier. And let me think of my other handle, and LinkedIn as well. And yeah, I'm around. I'm out there on the social media platforms, but through the website and by email, if they really want to take part, that would be fantastic. So that's where I'm going. I'm going to get this certification. Will be finished probably in April. Mm-hmm. And I'll be continuing to work on the creation of the online course in the meantime. So I really want people to thrive in the fourth trimester, not just survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I just can't tell you how valuable this is, and just, even for me, I'm not going to have any more children. But
But you may know somebody.
Oh, I do. I definitely
are having
do.
children.
I definitely do. And then hopefully one of these days in the future, not right now, I'll become a grandmother. So I will have to call upon these things. I wish I had a book like yours back then. I know that it would have been profoundly helpful for me. So thank you again. And to our listeners, thank you for listening today, and please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. I think that some of you may be in the phases of planning to have children, or you have friends who are going to have children. This is an insightful episode for them to listen to. So please continue to follow the Parenting 411, and please, again, share this episode. And as always, follow what I'm doing at the Parenting 411 on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And remember, it is never too late to be the parent you want to be.